Hello and welcome back to my studio. It's Lois here from Lois and Morgana Davidson Art, and today I'm going to be doing something a bit different. I'm going to be creating this abstract seascape. It's been sort of born out of experimentation, and you often hear artists encouraging beginners especially to experiment, as it's a really important part of learning about watercolour. But often, as a beginner, you don't really know what experimenting means. You start off splashing some paint around and nothing really comes from it. So it can be a little bit sort of confusing. But I find that focused experimentation can be much more helpful. And by that I mean giving yourself a sort of a focus around which you can then experiment. For example, here my focus was crashing, breaking waves, and just to create the impression of the sea without actually painting it. And of course, you could apply that to any kind of experimentation. You could experiment with painting figures in silhouette, or finding sunset colours, or painting rolling hills and wild mad trees in a forest. So if you give yourself a focus, it can really help with experimentation. So I'm going to turn the camera on while I have one of these experimental sessions, and you can watch how I go about it. But first, just before the demo, a quick plug for my new book, Landscapes in Watercolour, Techniques and Tutorials for the Complete Beginner. Now available from all good bookstores with some great reviews as well, and thank you to those that have left them. I'll leave a couple of links below. Now back to the demo. Today I'm using Milford cold press watercolour paper. It's taped to my board, and my board's at an angle of about 20 to 30 degrees to start with. So I'm going to wet it with a large mop brush, sort of in a kind of patchy way. And now I'm applying really rich cobalt blue, and I shall just dab on some burnt sienna, again really rich, amongst the cobalt blue. When this marries and mingles, it should give me a sort of a warm grey. Now I'm spraying it with a water spray. Remember, this is experimental, so I sort of want a bright blue summer sky, but I want churning waves below. So this is what I'm going to try and create now, turning my board, sort of painting with the flow of the water as it flows across the page as I turn it in different directions, upside down, pulling the paint across the tape. And this is pure experimental stuff. It could end up a dreadful mess, but even if it does, it's going to be a lot of fun, and I will learn an awful lot about watercolour and its effects, the way it sort of works with water. I'm already seeing these lovely grey colours coming just from the cobalt blue and the burnt sienna. Now that's something to note. I'm also noticing that I'm getting some wonderful granulation, so I'm going to keep tipping and tilting the board, moving the paint around, adding more paint, maybe lifting some out with some absorbent kitchen roll, just experimenting. I keep asking myself, what will happen if I try this? What will happen if I do that? And there's no wrong or right way to do this. It's just pushing the paint and seeing what happens, and using my imagination and sort of going with the flow, really. And that's what I encourage beginners to do. It's a fantastic way to loosen up and to really find your way into some positive experimentation, which will help you to progress, and you'll learn so much from it. And of course, you can do this on the backs of old paintings, so it's a great way of being fairly economical with your experimentation as well. So this is how it looks after sort of scraping back the paint, applying more paint, spattering some on with the fan brush, allowing some of the spots to land on drier paper as it's slowly drying out, and some of the spots that land on the wet paint will softly diffuse. Just trying to again enhance some areas of darker water bursting up from the sea across the bottom, and trying to build up the idea of just sea spray coming up across the main body of the page, all in a very abstract way. And that's what this sort of experimentation is about. It's just letting yourself be free, not trying to sort of worry about the end result, but enjoying the process and learning through experimentation all the sort of weird and wonderful things that watercolour can do if you just go with the flow. So I think I've built up enough layers. I'm now going to leave it to dry completely. So here's the dry painting so far, and I'm really pleased with the sort of abstract feeling, the fresh, lively amounts of movement in this painting so far. But it is all a bit of a mess, and I think I can sort of cement the illusion of my breaking waves if I add some seabirds, some gulls to this painting. So you can see very faintly, top left, I've penciled in a large gull and 3 smaller distant gulls. And it's also very interesting when you discover that incredibly loose paintings can be pulled together with just a tiny amount of more realistic detail. So here, if I paint in one sort of reasonably detailed but still quite loose gull and a couple of just suggestions of gulls with little marks in the distance, it should be enough to suggest to the viewer that they're looking at a breaking wave and rough sea against a blue sky. The colours that I've used here in this seascape, I think I mentioned cobalt blue and burnt sienna was what I started with, but then I continued and worked into that with the abstract washes with some indigo and some Payne's grey and a little bit of burnt umber. And now I'm using Payne's grey to paint in the darker parts of the gulls. And then I shall use some white gouache, which is what I spattered into the painting. I'll use some white gouache just to lighten up the belly of the largest gull. And then work into the shadow of the lower wing, just to give a little bit of body and 3D-ness to this gull here, so that we can sort of feel him flying above the sea spray. So I started off with a rigger brush, and now I've moved on to my small calligraphy brush just for the final detail. And that's the finished experimental painting. And once I remove the tape, hopefully you'll see the effects that I've created and the illusion that's sort of pulled together right at the end just by the simple addition of some seabirds. When we look at it with its clean white border, it helps us to see if we need anything else. And I think I just need to add another sort of layer of white gouache because it does dry back a lot lighter. So I'm spattering on and just painting with the tips of my fan brush a little bit more of this lovely white paint, just to bring another layer into the front of my sea spray part of the painting. And here's the finished result, and I'm really pleased with the way it's come together just with the simple addition of those little gulls. And I hope this has helped some of you, especially beginners who might have a bit of a painting block when it comes to experimentation, that maybe if you have some sort of a focus, like maybe a seascape, a storm, mountains, something like that, when you start your experiment, that'll help you to stay on track and sort of give you something to aim towards as you play around and experiment. And try and keep an open mind as you experiment. Things will often turn out very different to the way that you think they will, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. We can learn so much, and one of the things to learn is excuse me, is that we really can't tame watercolour and expect to keep it lively and fresh. We have to be able to work with watercolour and go with the flow. Well, I hope this studio vlog was helpful, and if you enjoyed it, then please click on the thumbs up button. And if you aren't subscribed to our channel, then I'd love you to subscribe. It's free to do, and it really helps with our reach. And if you click on the bell icon, you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. And thank you so much to everyone that supports the channel on Patreon. I'll see you again soon. Take care and happy painting. Bye.